Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for USports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics, setting up week 5 in the OUA. We're going to take you around USports, talk about the games that are on our radars, start off with a little top 10 conversation because that seems to be what drives the content machine, and so much more. But first, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm always doing well, man, especially this week. It's the At the 55 Bowl. We're going to be
Yeah.
in the house in Ron Joy Stadium. This is what you and I look forward to every single year, even if both of our teams are near the bottom of the OUA. That just means that much more we need a dub.
Exactly. It's a must win for both clubs. We'll talk about that when we get to that preview because we're changing things up a little bit from what we did last year, but we'll explain all that when we get there. It's looking to be a great week. Frankly, it's kind of feeling like same of last week where I'm a little more excited for some of the stuff happening outside the OUA. And as the trend continues, particularly in CanWest. But we'll get there when we get there. Let's start with the top 10, which I guess will take us into consideration of all the teams across U Sports. And for the week of September 15th, it goes like this. At number 1, the Laurier Golden Hawks, Montreal at 2, Western at 3, Laval at 4, Regina at 5, St. Mary's at 6, Bishops at 7, Saskatchewan tied at 7 with Bishops, the Queens Golden Gales at 9, and finally, well, actually, I don't know if they were in earlier in the season, but they weren't last week. The Ottawa GGs coming in at number 10. Tom, some interesting developments in here off the jump. I want to quickly give a shout out to a comment we got on YouTube from our week 4 preview pod to at Andrew_T. The ELO rankings that you are talking about is actually an ELO ranking based on a mathematical formula devised by Hungarian physicist Arpad Elo. Each team ratings is adjusted for each game, so on and so forth. And he just goes on to say, I agree, sports could be more transparent, but it's a widely used rating system for things like chess and esports, so that's probably why they don't explain it all that much. He then goes on to say, great job. He appreciates the show. I mean, obviously, I could have probably just Googled that between now and then. Shout out to you, Andrew, for letting us know that it doesn't really clear up too much the fact that it's an algorithm that's used widely in ranking systems like chess and esports. Again, not too sure all the various calculations that go into said algorithm. But again, shout out to that individual. And though I don't know if we'll read it verbatim, another comment that about the top 10s that were very interesting. I'll hand it off to you, Tom, for either a PG version of said comment and just your opening comments on this top 10.
Yeah, certainly need to do a PG version of this one, but somebody called out the fact, as you read out the rankings, there's an interesting dialogue, and I don't think it's all that controversial for a lot of other folks who are outside of the AUS, but essentially is the rankings don't make any sense. It sounds like we're trying to be a little too polite to all of our Canadian teams. There is no team in the AUS that could beat even the bottom tier of the CanWest.
I mean that I disagree with. I mean, do I look at this list and I like there's just a few things in here where I'm still a bit, at odds with. I mean, I think Saskatchewan falling to 7, I think it's fair, with just, obviously a tight game, whatever you want to say, no Rhett Varver for them. But a good Manitoba team that beat them. And obviously, like, if Sask makes that field goal at the end, like, what are we talking about then? Are they still ahead of Regina? And we have the Battle of Saskatchewan this Friday. That's obviously, I think, the number one game that is drawing the attention of most people, aside from the At 55 Bowl, of course. But so you have that aspect of it, but then you have Manitoba still not being in there. And, as far as like Bishops and St. Mary's and St. FX falling out, I mean, for St. FX, I mean, I guess we're kind of having our around the league conversation a bit before then, but like they didn't have Fagnon in it against, Bishop. So I don't really know what to make of that. And this week we're getting Bishops and, St. Mary's and St. FX. If there's no Fagnon, well, then they obviously shouldn't be in there. But could I envision a world that he's back from whatever was ailing him and they beat St. Mary's? Totally. So now what do you make of the fact that St. Mary's took it to Bishops? Bishops took it to a Silas Fagnon less St. FX team. And in this situation I'm painting that then St. FX beat St. Mary's, what do you make of that? Should there be all 3 of those teams in? Probably not. It's tough because then again, there's, Manitoba sitting there right on the cusp, waiting to get in there, and a Calgary team that is going to go into UBC against a strong Thunderbirds club, and we'll see what we make of that one. So, I mean, it's tough because I do love what we've been seeing out of these AUS teams, particularly with St. Mary's and then coming off the bye, and how that defense and with the offense adding in with Shipley has been a huge improvement for them. So as far as the bottom, hard to say, but I mean, again, it's like you were mentioning about the comment that was just directed towards us from a CanWest fan of like the number one thing that CanWest has going for them is they don't have a bad team. So it's hard to make of what to say until we truly get our cross conference games that will, I don't want to say never happen because never is a long time, but we're always just going to end up having these conversations, but I'm not terribly mad at it because they're fun conversations to have.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I think I'm certainly biased, and I think every recent U Sports fan should be biased based off of the games that we've seen previously from certain AUS clubs against the OUA, RSEQ, and the Canada West getting into those semifinal games. But let's not forget what 2 or 3 years ago when St. FX hosts Saskatchewan, they are playing with them right up until like the end of the third quarter kind of thing. Now, obviously, you have to play a full 4 quarters of football, but let's not forget that is the best team out of the CanWest and the best team in the AUS, and they were toe-to-toe with them for the majority, if not the entirety of that game. So there's aspects of this certainly, and maybe an AUS best team, the best team in the AUS on their best day against the worst team in the CanWest on their worst day, for sure, whatever else. But it's all just speculation right now. And shout out to James, who gave us that fun question to ask, and probably less than PG terms, but we appreciate all of the engagement there. But yeah, I have to assume that there would be at bare minimum a really great competition there, but until that happens, like myself personally, seeing that Saskatchewan squad, I'd still have them above St. Mary's and Bishops myself.
Definitely, and just to your point of that St. FX Saskatchewan UTEC Bowl or whichever one it was, a Saskatchewan team that then went toe to toe with Laval in that Vanier Cup, and a Laval team that just took it to London, took it to Western in London. Now we're starting to get into the, transient property, which oftentimes leads to like fallacious ways of thinking about things. And it's, obviously styles make fights and all these types of things. So, hey, we got great teams across the nation, and man, it's exciting to think about what's to come the U Sports playoffs, but we are luckily still many weeks away, though it's coming quicker and quicker. And as a sort of program reminder, next week we'll start to do our mid-season check-ins. If you didn't by chance, though, listen to Tom's interview with the head coach of those UBC Thunderbirds, Blake Nill, please do yourself a favor and go listen to that. Tom, again, I said to you before, and I'll say it again, I'm certain I'll say it many times afterward. It was an awesome podcast. Great job by you. And Coach Nill is just maybe it's the proximity bias of he's either been all the way out east or all the way out west, and just trying to get a sense of what he's all about. And that podcast, I think I appreciate so much more the role he's played in Canadian football, the history of Canadian football, than I really did going into listening to that. Let me just give you the floor to say any additional words about that one. Again, for folks who haven't listened to it, just came out, time recording today. But yeah, Tom, I know you talked about it a bit on the review pod from week 4, but again, just having listened to it now, I want to hear you talk about it some more.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience getting a chance to speak to Coach Nill. He's a legend in the game. He's the first, and I believe still the only U Sports head coach to win Vanier Cups at 2 different programs, which is an incredible feat. And even, we were talking about it a little bit, but those Calgary teams that he had in the early to mid 2010s were so unbelievable. I listed off some of the names that were in there, but the fact that they didn't win a Vanier Cup and had run there was just incredible. But the one aspect, and I think you can hear it on the podcast, but I really wanted to call out, there was a couple times in there when I'm talking to him about some previous accomplishments and previous teams where he is straight up got tears in his eyes, and you can hear him getting choked up as I'm asking him questions. Like, this is a dude who cares so much about the programs that he's involved with, the city, and obviously the student athletes that he has here. It was just something that was really cool to see because you see a lot of coaches, and there's a lot of coaches out there that truly care about their kids, obviously, but to physically see the emotion talking to a man about a football team in St. Mary's that he coached at like 20 years ago, and he's still being emotional about the things that they accomplished, that was pretty special to see and be a part of.
Totally. And kind of bring it back to the AUS piece of it all, just for folks who've been maybe newer to U Sports in general. Though we talked about a St. FX team that was, 3 degrees away from being competitive against Laval in a Vanier Cup, that makes no sense. But like, again, for those who are a little newer to this whole thing here, like it's much less than a lifetime ago that AUS teams, St. Mary's, as much as any other, were at the forefront of teams to model your program after in U Sports football. And obviously I loved all the commentary he made about the similar efforts that we make of recognizing that we have such a good product, and if it's just packaged the right way, it can go toe to toe with any league. So again, go listen to that episode. Would love your feedback on it. Shout out to Coach Nil. We'll talk about his Thunderbirds a little bit later in their matchup with Calgary, but let's bring it back to the OUA and kick things off in the nation's capital. I mean, Tom, first and foremost, we're into that part of the season where, okay, it's only one of 3 weeks we have where we got 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock. It is what it is. We're starting in the nation's capital. The champs visiting the Ottawa GGs. The champs, of course, being the Laurier Golden Hawks, hot off the Battle of Waterloo win, and Ottawa off of that incredible team win in the Royal City against the Guelph Griffins, essentially snatching that top 10 spot from Guelph. I mean, Guelph's not even in the honorable mentions at this point from the top 10 as far as like that sort of 11 through 16, nor should they be at this point. I mean, York might have got a vote, and that might be, I think, factually incorrect as far as like who's throwing them the vote over Guelph. I mean, I can certainly think of a media member who would very much do that. And to your guy who giving us the shout out, again, we don't have any say in this. We just comment on it, waiting for our invitation in the mail. But Tom, Laurier traveling to Ottawa certainly favors the Golden Hawks in terms of just where these two clubs are at. We've seen Ottawa go into London and the score wasn't favorable, but we saw some really promising things from them offensively. We saw early on that defensive line that we've commented on has maybe not matched how good their linebacker secondary play has been so consistently over the last number of years, and is still really strong, but the defense as a whole, perhaps in some ways, feels a bit more well-rounded. I mean, which is crazy to say, given that Eric Cumberbatch is no longer with them, and so many other great players. But we were coming out of that game being like, I don't care about the score. This team is certainly worthy of being in that top 10. This has a feeling of a similar possible breakdown that we could be coming out of this game, Ottawa picking up the L, but there's going to be positive things to take away from it. For one, we've seen Josh Jansen seems to play well against these Laurier Golden Hawks, and that would certainly be another positive to see of him just continuing his growth. But let's start on the Ottawa side, hosting in this game. Win or lose, what are the things at this point in the season as we approach the midway point against the best we have in not only the province, but by the record books and by the rankings, I should say, in the country? What are the things you're looking to see Ottawa do to make their mark, forget what happens on the scoreboard?
I think this is the game, and if we're going historically speaking here, this is the game where Josh Jansen should have his coming out party. I mean, in the 2 games or 2 years that they've played against each other, he's thrown for 535 yards collectively and 2 touchdowns with no picks. Those are pretty good stats against what was the number 1 team in the country last year, and right up there for the number 1 team in the conference the year prior as well. So I'd love to see Josh Jansen really have that breakout game going into this one here. Certainly the run game for Ottawa, I like a lot. I think the two-headed monster with Suleiman Kamara and what Charles Aslan, what we know he can do, is something that I want to continue to see grow and expand on. And even those receivers for Ottawa offensively, like this is a solid squad that was able to do a lot of really good things against Guelph just last week. Defensively speaking, I know that the defensive secondary, especially with Cumberbatch and Ferdinand on that weak side, they're 100% going to be ready for a lot of the things that Laurier is going to be giving them. What I will really want to see from this Ottawa defense, how well are you going to be able to stop the run? Because that Laurier offensive line is top tier, and even if you do get past them, good luck trying to tackle Tayshaun Jackson or Quentin Scott in the hole. So I want to see how well can Riley Hildebrand and the rest of that squad, Jackson Brashear, Daniel Briere, how well can they stop the run first and foremost and turn Laurier into a potential one-dimensional offense? Even if they are one-dimensional in either way, they're still pretty damn deadly. But if you allow them to do anything they want, that's where you're in a lot of trouble. So that's really what I want to see from this Ottawa defense.
And to that point, we've been picking up on a possible trend for Laurier in not just the fact that they're running the ball and they're running it as well as anyone in the OUA right now, but that they're, again, with more shifty, quicker backs, are opting to run tackle to tackle. And whether that's just a product of trying to establish more of that inside downhill run game to complement, hey, look, we know that if we get these guys out in space, they'll do great things, and kind of doing that whole, let's make sure that we're as well-rounded a club as possible, that we can, beat you any which way to Sunday. I mean, because a team in Ottawa is a group that, again, prior to this year, and obviously Hildebrandt's in his fifth year there now, right? So he's been there for a while. Like, they've had good players on that D-line and obviously tremendous linebackers, but the pass rush and running the ball on them has been a little bit of a better proposition for offenses. Part of that too is the fact that teams are probably just less bullish to try and throw in that secondary. So you're gonna just want to run the ball inside because it's your best option to try to really ding them. So yeah, I'm bang on. I'm in the same ballpark of really trying to see that run game against this run defense for the Ottawa GGs. But I can't tell you how stoked I am to see, because obviously Laurier's going to spread the ball. They're going to get it to EJ. They're going to get it to Laomi. They're going to get it to all these guys. Hopefully Jackson Stebbings, we don't know his health status. It'd be good to see him back out. Ryan Hughes, pardon me, with those matchups that you were saying, and a guy in Nicholas Dion at safety that's been really impressive so far this year. So such an incredible matchup that we have on that side of the ball. And you mentioned what Jansen was doing, and frankly, those numbers over the two games, as you said, the 500 and change, the 2 touchdowns, the no interceptions, really clean games to say the least. And that works out to pretty well what we've been seeing him as that, kind of that standard, that floor type of game for him. It's just made that much more special when you're able to maintain what you do against the best teams, in the same way that folks have that conversation of, is being clutch really a function of elevating your game, or is it just that you're able to maintain what you do when everyone else is tired and the stress is starting to pile on to them? From the Laurier standpoint, in terms of their defense, as you alluded to, the two-headed monster of Suleiman Kamara, Charles Asselin, and that receiving core, and hopefully Romeo Lucier is back for them. But with obviously what Noah Avery's been doing, Gerba Thibault, and Robin Coulio, it's a really great arsenal of weapons that he has. From what we've been seeing from Laurier so far this season, which is darn near an impenetrable defense, what are the areas that, maybe it seems just like a moot point to even say, but what are the areas of this defense that you're looking to see tested a little bit more, as far as like, if we're going to nitpick a little bit, which is what we have to do when we talk about these Laurier teams. You brought it up last week where it's like, there's only so much we can say about the teams that are just clearly a cut above everyone else, which Laurier and Western certainly are. Thank goodness Western's on a bye. We don't have to talk about them as much. I'm kidding, Western folks. What are maybe those things that, the same way we talk about, okay, they're running inside between the tackles, maybe to refine that part of their offense. What's maybe the thing defensively? Harner obviously is out, but Owen Getz, as you mentioned, has been filling in tremendously for him. But if you were going to nitpick and say, this is the thing that, like, maybe Ottawa's not going to make you pay for it, but when you go into Western in week 9, or if you're matched up with Queens again with that offense and who they have, or if we're talking USports semifinals and beyond, where are you looking to see this Laurier defense really strengthen up in any aspect?
Well, it's tough when you look at this defense as a whole.
I know.
There's not a whole lot of space, but I think the one thing that I haven't seen, or that I can't really remember seeing all that much, is teams going for the deep ball against Laurier. And I think that we've seen a lot of stuff because what Laurier seems to do a lot, and especially with that defensive secondary, keep things in front of you. And then when you come downhill, you are hammering whoever decides that they want to catch that ball. It's a punishment to catch the ball against this Laurier defense. So because of that, I don't know how many teams have really tried to take a shot against these guys, especially once again, Owen Getz has been playing some fantastic football, but he is a backup. Like, let's see a post route on there. Let's see a choice route essentially. Hey, are you going to go and cover the post or are you going to cover the go route that's on that same side? Like, let's see something from that regard. Now, that means that you're going to have to hold on to the ball a little bit longer. And Andre Butte and Mateo LaQuintana are starting to lick their chops, saying, hey, I'm going to get there. And if I don't, Marcus Tenney's going to be right around the corner too. But I wouldn't mind seeing how well this team can defend the deep ball. I'm not even saying that that's a liability. I don't think that many teams have really tried their luck there. And certainly as you're going, and realistically speaking, if things kind of work out the way that we're seeing here, you're going to see another Laurier Western matchup. And what has Western done in the past? Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Here's play action. Bomb the ball deep to Seth Robertson down the sideline. So how well can you play against that? What are you really going to be focusing on? Because surely, especially with what you're seeing going into this, you're going to be focusing on the run game for Ottawa. You want to make sure that you're containing Suleiman Kamara and Charles Aslan as best as possible. Is Romeo Lucier going to come back in this one? Is Tristan Gilbert-Thibault going to come back? Like, there's potential there, and I really want to see how well is Laurier's deep ball defense.
Yeah, it'll be it's an interesting proposition. And when you have Noah Avery amongst all those guys, this is perhaps that breakout moment for him. I feel like most people should be aware in the OUA of him as not just their number one guy, but a number one guy. Like, clearly not just a circumstance thing of like, sometimes you have a guy where it's like, well, someone's got to catch the balls for that team or whatever. It's like, no, you put this guy on any team and he's competing as one of the top guys. I mean, if it's Laurier, obviously that's a tough situation with how good those receivers are that they have there. But putting that aside, this could be an interesting moment for whoever it is on Ottawa. Maybe it's Jansen. Maybe it finally is Asselin this year to really put the league on notice beyond the outcome of the game itself. Tom, I don't really have anything else much to comment on this one. I'm like, I don't know if I really have a hot take I'm making later on a pick, depending on who you're cheering for. It might sound like it. And this is the closest I was gonna to really go for one. And I'm a bit behind the standings, and I know that across the board, everyone's taking Laurier. But I'm going to roll with them. But I just want to, it's kind of a BS thing to say of like, oh, but if the game's remotely closer, goodness forbid Ottawa pulls up the win at home, I can say, but remember when I said I kind of thought about it a little bit? BS aside, I'm taking Laurier on the road on this, but if there's any other angles on stones uncovered, I don't mean to cut off the conversation early. But again, when we talk about Laurier, it's just that you can only look at so many angles, and this is an Ottawa team that we really, really love, but that's about all I got.
Yeah, no, I didn't really have anything else to talk about here. I am going with the Laurier Golden Hawks once again, along with you. I like this Ottawa team, I really do, but you won a game against the Guelph Griffins last week where Guelph had zero offense. Like, it was damn near non-existent the entire time, and it was still a relatively close game in that regard. So if you really want to be able to say, I'm in that top echelon and I'm ready to take over that top spot, you got to be beating the teams, especially when 1/3 out of the three teams is not performing well. Like, I wanted to see almost more domination from Ottawa if Guelph was struggling that much in one facet. So regardless, even if they played really well, I'm still going with Laurier, but I'm not ready to crown Ottawa and to say they're in that top echelon just yet.
No, certainly not. And it's a shame that we don't get Ottawa and Queens in the regular season. And I'm trying to envision, aside from some upsets happening, how we'd even get that in the playoffs. I mean, I'm pretty sure we worked this out a year or two ago. Like, no two teams have played each other as much this decade as those two clubs, in large part due to the COVID year when they played actually 3 times in 1 year. But that's really that, because I think we've now established that second tier is Queens and Ottawa, with like a shadow of Guelphness still in there if they can get healthy and kind of put things together. But, it's really those two teams, and not getting that comparison with one another is going to be fascinating to see. It's, again, an interesting case study weekend for the top 10 where if we're correct in Ottawa losing, and obviously it's not just about the loss, or at least it shouldn't be just about the loss. It's how the famous Grantland Rice quote. It isn't if you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And not to jump ahead, we have the at the 55 Bowl, Guelph at Mac. We'll talk about that in a moment, but there's a situation where Ottawa's coming out with a loss and Guelph's coming out with a win, and I swear if they flip-flop these teams again in the top 10, I'm going to be furious. But nonetheless, we have another game to get to before we start talking at the 55 Bowl, and it's a game that's going to take, two games, pardon me. It's a game that's going to take us to almost York region, just on the cusp. They still reside in the city of Toronto. York coming off of their bye to host the Carleton Ravens in a battle of the, I'm trying to think of the way to frame this, but who do you have the bigger fool me once, shame on me type vibes? Fool me once, shame on me, or fool me twice, shame on me with these two clubs? Because I feel like we've made the same argument with both these clubs. This is the gonna make me fly to Turkey, get some hair transplants just so I can pull it out of my hair again game here. I can't think of a more eloquent way to describe it. But two clubs that have been a little less than stellar by what we expected coming into the year. I mean, York, of course, by the record, still sitting all right, but certainly with both these clubs, it's a lot of you're this close to being put in timeout. I mean, Carleton, I think, is in timeout right now, but York, if you talk out of turn one more time or whatever, you're going to go right there next to them. A game of two teams that I think have frustrated us more than anyone else in the OUA, and possibly to the extent that we know of all the other teams in USports, possibly across the country.
Yeah, easily. Both of these teams have made me want to pull my hair out a few times, but if you're talking to me about who's more frustrating, it has to be Carleton. I mean, at the end of the day, York is 3-1 on the season. And while there's a few games in there that didn't exactly play their best and they could have flopped it one way or the other, they're still 3-1. They don't ask how, they ask how many. And this Carleton squad, I mean, it has to be. Okay, obviously, watching them play and having them lose the way that they have been has been super frustrating. But now in this most recent game, it's always going to be a tough beat against Western. No matter who you are, it's tough to do anything super successfully here. But to see the quarterback play that we saw, I mean, Elijah Barnes, you crowned as one of the top quarterbacks and certainly one of the best. And I don't think you're wrong in that regard by any means, but he goes 10 for 13 for 99 yards, no touchdowns and 2 picks. And then Lefebvre comes in there, 10 for 19, 160 yards, yes, 1 touchdown, but another 2 picks. This squad throws 4 interceptions against Western, who 1 interception against them is a complete backbreaker, let alone 4. So it has to be these Carleton Ravens. They drive me absolutely nuts. They should be so much better than what they are.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. The York record, the 2 wins that they picked up. I mean, both of them being games where it's like the same way that we had that conversation of UofT. You're so close to having that 3-0 record going into the game against Queens, and don't think that would have changed the outcome of that one. New York, you're so close to being 0-3. But you're totally right. It's the Carleton Ravens. And I said it on the review podcast from last week. At this point, throwing my guy Zach George into the game. Come on, let's just try whatever we can. And for York, this is where I think I'm really excited to see what that offense can do. And I don't care that it's going to come against Carleton. I mean, for one, if their offense, we've seen good things from that offense. We've seen Keegan Hall put together really impressive drives. We've seen Avery Ford. We've seen CJ Vincent. A lot of these guys, Avante McCoy, obviously, do really good things with that offense. Melkus, when they do decide to hand the ball off every now and again, doing some solid things on the ground. It's a story of a team that's been super banged up, offense and especially defense, and totally worth caveating it. And I think that's why we said, hey, you picked up the win at home despite it, stealing win from the grasp of defeat or whatever. They picked up the win going into the bye to get healthy. If their offense doesn't really click against this Carleton team, I'm going to be a bit concerned, because we have seen that this is the game where on your schedule, if you're kind of trying to work out the kinks, There's a few things that you're like, we just haven't hit that rhythm. Like, gosh, I mean, I can't wait for Guelph to go play Carleton at this point, just to really see that offense, like, look good again. And if only for a flash in the pan, just to be like, I knew there was something there. But this is going to be one that, like, I want to see York really put up some big points. Defensively, obviously, we need to see if Brody Clark's back. Peyton Ryder, haven't seen him all season. And it's, I think, enough for them. They'll be able to get by in this one if those guys are out. Niall Chiari has been good there, replacing Clark a few times. I'm forgetting their guy's name, 45 in the middle, replacing Austin Daisy. Good opportunities for them. But on the flip side as well, it's the same thing where I almost feel like there's a lot of pressure on York here coming off the bye and being at home, Ottawa coming in, Carleton coming in all the way from Ottawa, where, like, even without those injuries, I'm not letting that enter the conversation. Because just from what we've seen from Carleton, as you said, it's like we don't know who their quarterback's going to be. We don't know how many quarterbacks they're going to start in this one. The rushing games, again, I like those guys that they have there, with Roca and Keyshawn Reed, and some of those other guys. But like we're halfway through the season at this point. So, I mean, I guess I'm somewhat giving away my pick. I'm taking York to win here at home. But much like as we said at the start of the year with a couple of these teams of, like, it's not just entirely about the win, it's how you go out and do it. This is now where York can stake their claim of, they can say, hey, we're going to the midway point of the year. We're 3-1, and we just had our most efficient game. Forget who we played against. You saw, like, we all knew going into the year with those guys they had on offense and some of those guys defensively and the guys calling it up for them, that, like, the potential's there. Sometimes you have to see it to believe it, even if all the pieces are in place and the process is good. Sometimes you just need that taste of, like, oh yeah, we just dropped 55 in that game and it felt really dang good. And we held them all out of the end zone and just to 2 field goals or whatever it is.
Yeah, also love the fact that they should be scoring 55 points. Have to do it. Love it. But yes, I completely agree with you. Regardless of who this is, this could be Western that York is playing against. After the 4 games that they've already played, going into a bye week and coming out of this should be the very best version of who York is, whoever is in there. Obviously, if Peyton Ryder and Brody Clark are in there, that just means you're that much better. But having this bye week at the midpoint of the season and coming out, especially after having the experience of playing against a bunch of teams, it's one thing to come out of training camp. Obviously, it's the very beginning of the season. You've only been together for a couple of weeks here. So there's only so much chemistry that you can kind of build. The fact that you've already had these games and these wins, you're 3-1, you go into a bye week, and then you come out of this should be your best showing so far, because you should be as healthy as you can be, and you should be as efficient as possible. So I'm really expecting a lot from York here, and I'm putting a lot of expectations on York the same way that you would do any team that you think has a lot of potential. I want to see what your very best looks like. I want to see how well you can put things together. Is this just going to be another version of York's offense where Keegan Hall seemingly drags everybody else across the goal line with him as he engineers everything? Or are we really going to start seeing the growth of all of those other receivers and route running and how well are they blocking and really getting a run game going here? So, yeah, I have still, it's very strange to say this even in this year with everything else, but I have very high expectations for York, and I want to see them perform at the level I think they should be.
And I don't know how much good it does to scoreboard or standings watch if you're York, but as the folks not on the field that just get to talk about these things, it's worth noting that with just the abysmal start to the year by Guelph, and Carleton being another team that we expected to take a step forward or to finally become the team that we saw those pieces of. And again, I get it. Ife Onyeka's not there. And I get it that Kasim Ferdinand, like all-time Ravens, I get it. It's team sports, and we liked a lot of those guys there. I get it. But you look at the standings right now, and again, it's partly with them only have played the 3 games, and the week after this, York's going to play Queens. But as it stands right now, the season ended. York's hosting Queens in a first-round playoff matchup. And I'm not going to say that's going to hold up per se, but they get Carleton this week, They go to Queens, they get Waterloo, they got Western, and then they have Guelph. And by all accounts, from what we've seen right now, I'm confident to say that loss column will get to 3. I'm not confident to say anything more than that, which says that that 5-3 record is so in play for this team right now, which given tie break situations, you lost to Ottawa. We're kind of playing out the scenario in which we're kind of saying you're probably going to lose to Queens next week in Kingston. I think that's fair to say even on the week 5 podcast. But that 5-3 record is so in play for them right now. And if a few weird things happen, and it's been a weird year in the OUA, again, I think mostly as a product of just how good a lot of these teams are. Kind of did that exercise just reading through the standings last week, just to being like, I don't know if this makes sense. It kind of feels like it's all weird, what have you. Again, that home playoff game it's not out of reach for this team, and obviously the playoffs are very much like what they should be expecting at this point, and if nothing else, to be that 5 going to 4 seed is just for a team that we're talking about the York Lions, man, and this is also in play. So I think, as much as we're saying it's the statement, it's also that piece on like, hey, look, the season's getting old quickly, and let's make our mark while, strike while the iron's hot, or, strike while the, opponent's iron is, I don't know, it's ice cold, it's whatever. For Carleton, Tom, I mean, at this point, gosh, I mean, sitting at, it's still 1-2, and I feel like we're both in a line. We're taking York here at home, but it's not. Am I going to be, just blown away if we are tuning in on Sunday to record and we're talking about Carleton sitting now at 2-2, picking up this win, and they've had a couple of their really tough games already, this, that, and the third, and we can go over their schedule. But is there a pathway to salvage things for Carleton, or have we seen enough right now where it's like, okay, yeah, they could pick up this win? But it's like it's more than just a win we need to be seeing at this point from these Ravens to really instill any level of confidence that, yeah, okay, you could be at 2-2, but it's one of the games we're going to play next week in our midseason preview pod is a little bit of is this team as good, better, or below where their record stands? There'll be an interesting case study for that. But again, it is a non-zero reality that Carleton ends up with a win on the day. The year hasn't given us reason to believe too strongly in that. What would you need to see to beyond just the win? Because I don't think the win's going to cut it, to say, all right, okay, it took them a while, to quote my old man, it took us a while, but that's all right. We're starting to see things. What would you even need to fathom seeing in this game beyond a win? Because I know we talk about the wins within the losses. At this point, if you fall to 1-3, I don't care how good Elijah looks or all these types of things. It's just like you're not bouncing back from that. What would you need to see in addition to the win for Carleton to start to win us back a bit?
Honestly, I would need to see a domination. I would really have to see Elijah Barnes or Lefebvre, whoever is in there, 400 yards, 3 or 4 touchdown passes, a defense that looks stingy and is holding Keegan to, 10 or 13 points or something along those lines. Like, I would have to see a whole lot from this Carleton Ravens squad before I'm ready to change my mind. This is a team that has been driving me nuts for this half of the season that we've seen so far, and that I expected so much more from them. And that first game against UofT, I think it is obviously from what we've seen against the majority of the teams, UofT does have a very potent passing attack and they do have an offense, but just like the fundamentals seem to be off from this Carleton Ravens squad, and they've gotten better and better as things have gone on here, certainly, but like I would have to see a complete 180 from what we have been seeing in order for me to really say, "Oh wow, I think I'm on these Carleton Ravens now." Like I just don't know who I'm going to see, and every time I have my hopes up for these Ravens so far this year, I have been bitterly disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I think point in case is that win at Waterloo, where in many ways we were still just more impressed with Waterloo on the day, at least with that defense and some of the things we were starting to see offensively, Nick Orr back in there and everything like that. And even if like, because again, I'm dubious that Brody Clark's back. Just to be completely frank, again, you've told that story a few times of when we went up to try and talk to him, and they kind of all gave us that side eye, like, get away from us, don't talk to our guy. Peyton Ryder, again, it's don't know the full status there. It's in that weird part where when a guy comes into the season not being on the team or not playing, it makes you think of all those other non-football reasons that it could be. And I'm not going to speculate because I don't know the case. That's not my part to do so, but it's not our first rodeo being around here. And sometimes those things are whole year situations. I mean, we saw it with not Quentin Springer, sorry. The other oh my God, Laurier, running backs, help me out. Tom.
Kayshawn Jackson, Quentin Scott.
Quentin Scott, thank you. Great Scott. And we saw it with that last year, right? Came in the season, what, Quentin Scott's not, and then a whole year passes, right? So even if so I say a lot in saying that even for Carleton, if they start to look good offensively, I still think there's a reality that this York team is short of those key pieces that make them a really, really special team. You still have Foxy Noxy calling it up, so that still gives them an advantage over most teams. So it's one of those situations where even if they had a really nice day offensively, we still might be coming up being like, oh man, York really they didn't get any healthier and didn't return any of those players on defense and all these types of things. So it's not looking good for the Ravens. It's York at home in this one for me because it's just based on the way we set it up. I don't think we're coming out with our minds changed about them. Final thoughts, Tom, to you on this one.
This is one of those rare situations where I think no matter who wins and depending on how they win, I'm going to be frustrated at one of these teams. Even if Carleton does exactly what I said and they dominate in every facet, it just means I'm just going to be frustrated with York and how they've been. So not 100% looking forward to this game, but yeah, I'm going with the Lions in this one.
Well, we are going to hop on the train at York University Station and take it all the way down to St. George to go check out the Windsor Lancers taking on the UofT Blues at Varsity Stadium. I say all that metaphorically because we're going to be in Hamilton during this whole period. UofT coming off of a tough loss at home against the Queen's Golden Gales, and Windsor coming off of a strong win against the McMaster Marauders, also at home for them. Tom, here's the number one thing that's been having me go back and forth on my thoughts about this game is that, like, we talked about going into that game against Queens of the emotional, mental piece of things for the UofT of, man, that Waterloo game and then Battle of Toronto, and for it to end like that. And as I've said a few times, both on this pod, on the review pod, I think the preview pod for last week, UofT, the real possibility they win that game against Queens at 3-0 to me does not change the ultimate outcome of how that Queens game would have fared. Would it have been a couple different scores, this, that, and the third? Sure, totally. Butterfly flaps and swings in Mexico, and there's a tornado in Timbuktu, whatever, right? So I don't think that the loss against Queens was because of, like, man, the emotional strain of those back-to-back overtime losses. And I'm certainly not questioning the emotional resolve and emotional toughness of this UofT team. By no means. Having said that, that was a tough Queens game to come off of. And when, we know, even if folks in the UofT camp, I don't know, no matter how many shots they want to take at us, for our initial reactions to the start of the season, and greater evidence throughout the season's proven that, like, clearly they have an incredible passing attack, but let's add an asterisk next to what you did against Carleton because of everything else we've seen from Carleton. That we've seen that passing attack's been really strong. It's been a really impressive year for UofT. Those tough emotional losses, and then to have Queens come in and, despite the clear advantage that they had in all facets of the game, to not just do what they did on the whole, but then the 5 interceptions as well, right? And with that specifically of where UofT's just been able to have this really special thing going on this year for them as a club. And sorry, on the topic of the 3 interceptions, thank you to whomever it was who called us out. We didn't give a shout out to John Corskaden for the 3 interceptions. We just love our guy in Ashton Miller Melanson so much. So, shout out to Corskaden. This sort of 3 weeks now of tough losses and capping off with one that was not just a beatdown on the scoreboard, but really not that we were terribly surprised given how great Queens is defensively, but just shut down that passing attack. Some good things early on, but shut it down so triumphantly. Again, I'm not saying any of that to question where UFT's at, but just for any team to go through this span of 3 weeks and then especially have it capped off of the thing you've done so well, arguably better than any team in the country, be shut down. That's a difficult thing, or I think it's fair to say that it's something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you brought up the how that happened, because when you start looking at Queens Toronto, I think most everybody was saying, yeah, it's Queens in this one for sure. So I'm not surprised at the fact that Queens won. It's the dominating fashion that they won. And now, once again, why it's so important to watch the games rather than just looking at the stats. We saw Toronto actually move the ball pretty effectively. Obviously, the end of drives wasn't great, and throwing 5 interceptions in that regard is what kind of leads to that. But like when you see an offense that was damn near averaging 400 yards in the air be limited to 266 yards of total offense, including 213 in the air and 53 on the ground. Like, to me, that's total domination from a Queens squad. And once again, that Queens defense is one of the very best. So read into that as best you can. But I think for this Toronto squad that was really trying to expand and trying to showcase why they are a playoff caliber team, you can't lose to the Queens of the world and those teams even near the top, maybe not even necessarily at the top, but near the top. You can't lose like this. And you start talking about all the close games that they've been in and those heartbreakers with Waterloo and against York. There's certain times and there's certain aspects here where you start talking to people, and I've had a few conversations with folks across the league, and they just talk about how to win. You need to learn how to win football games. And this idea of, like, exactly like you were mentioning before, that idea of being clutch is really just performing as well as you have from the first quarter into overtime. And those, when you have to have a play, when you're in an overtime setting or you're going for a 2-point conversion, you have to have a catch. You have to have a block. You have to have a throw. And the great teams just dig deep and find it. And if it's that same energy of, I'm just going to play how I always play, even despite the fact that I've just played 4 hours of football here, it is what it is. But that's the biggest piece to me that was missing from this UofT squad up until this Queens game, that extra oomph to take them over the edge and to get that. But against a Queens squad that is as good as we think they are, to see that total kind of domination here, and once again having UofT fans in our comments section being like, "Oh, you guys are making the same mistake you did previously. Like, we'll just watch what UofT is going to do against Queens." What happened in that game, boy? Oh,
Were people really saying that? And I don't. Oh my guys, what literally happens? Okay, UofT is that we come into the year somewhat dubious because though we love the idea of you being a great team, let's start with a good team, and there's been good years, but you come into a year where we just go through the teams and we say, man, like the top's really strong, and then there's these other teams that have, I don't know, just been consistently making the playoffs and been, I don't know, beating teams like UofT and Waterloo and York and recently kind of Mac in that mix as well. And then UofT comes out and they win a game or two and everyone acts like, my goodness, this is the year. And no one's happier than us. But then we get to a point where just reverts back to the mean a little bit. And that's not to say they're a bad team. It's just to say that, come on, like there are some really, really strong teams in this league, and you ran into one in Queens last week. Really, people were, wow, that's, invite them on the pod. I'd love to talk to him. And let's invite Windsor into this conversation, because just sticking with the defensive side of the ball, and once again, I'm not trying to like pretend like I'm in the mind of Scott Barnett, any of the receivers, any of the offensive minds. It's not the same as looking across the field and seeing, those golden gales and all the, weapons that Coach McManus can trot out there. But seeing number 23 and Ethan John, seeing Robert Springer back there, seeing Esteban Asibo-Dotsi, Liam Hoskins coming off the edge, the young kid at middle linebacker, Piccioni, Ahmad Taylor, who we saw have his breakout game last week against Mac with the 3.5 sacks. Again, this is a UofT team that's rested its laurels on its offense doing incredibly special things. And I don't think Windsor has the same tools to do what Queens did necessarily. But that's a really interesting matchup. Let's talk about this specific matchup, the UofT offense, the Windsor defense. We've been able to see Windsor defensively now. Laurier game, obviously Laurier did what they were able to do. A Guelph team that had a couple nice drives, but that Windsor was really effective against. I mean, as we've started to learn, Guelph offensively has just not been where we expected them this year. And then again, against the MAC team that offensively still needing to find themselves, but you can see the difference between MAC not executing and Windsor at times putting them into difficult situations. When you look at the strength of this UofT team, we've seen them try to commit to the run a little bit with some consistency, and a Windsor team that defensively has maybe not been as strong as they've been, but Coach Donovan, obviously as good a choice as you could have in there. Compare and contrast this offense and this defense going into this game with UofT and Windsor.
Yeah, I mean, the games that we have seen Windsor kind of struggle in, it hasn't been because of a lack of defense, but more so a lack of production on offense. When you see that Lancer offense have to continuously do a 2-and-out or not being able to finish in the end zone or whatever the case may be, that's where this team can kind of struggle a little bit. And that's exactly what's happened in their 2 losses, one against Laurier and the other one against Guelph. And this idea of even against Guelph, when they were up 14-0 in the first quarter, nothing else really happened offensively from that regard. And 7 of those points was a pick 6. And then slowly but surely, this Guelph team decided to wake up. They started handing off the ball a little bit more. And that's really where we saw, Donovan Malloy start to take over, and then Isaiah Smith, obviously, with that one big run. But I don't envision the same thing here because exactly like you said, this UofT squad very easily could have been 3-0 going into the Queens game on the backs of that offense. Because that offense was moving the ball so well and because that passing attack looks so impressive, that's really where that comes into play. And now, don't get me wrong, I think Ryan Stewart is a hell of a football player. He has been playing some lights out football. Ilya Linney as well has been doing some really great things, but for the most part, that is a UofT defense that is not really, you're not expecting them to walk in and shut down a team completely. If anything, from that defense, I'm expecting them make enough plays, stop them just a few times and limit them just enough so that our offense can take over and to really go from there. It's this matchup for me where the strength of that Windsor team is in that defense, and specifically in that defensive secondary going up against a UofT squad that just got blown out in this kind of regard. This is a very tough matchup for UofT. Oh, I don't know if it's just me, my man, but I can't hear you on my side. I don't know if you're muted at all. While you're figuring that out, I'll continue to keep going here.
I should be back. My apologies. Sorry.
There you are. Here we are.
My apologies. I just gonna say that we love all those things on the UofT defense. Windsor offensively, as we said at some point in that conversation, that's been the thing that's holding them back, at least by proxy of it's. This defense has been really strong, but I'm not trying to say it's Nick Domofsky that's held them back, but we've keep talking about whether it's Colby Ginn or with obviously Waby Mambo and some of these other receivers that we've started to see really pop off for them, like Tyreek Quason. And I know and Kareem Cotton, that's the name I was trying to remember. We really like what they've been seeing, but we just haven't yet to see Domofsky put together a really strong game. And on the flip side of it, you already highlighted the reasons that UofT, despite not being world beaters, have a lot of similarities in terms of, but there's a lot of pieces there that we really like. Where do you see, you know, one where like kind of where do you see things kind of leveling off, in terms of, Mac defensively is, I'd say at this point in the year, we'd like him better than what for U of T. And they obviously were able to make Domofsky uncomfortable. Malik Bolt in the middle and Palmer, good job against that big O line. Where do you see the sort of the water finding its level with two teams, two units in the Windsor offense that's yet to really find its stride, and a U of T defense that also is just by proxy of what their offense has done at times, been able to maybe put teams into different sort of force them into certain looks they might not otherwise have put in. Do we see Domofsky really have his best game so far, or are we starting to see maybe U of T against the Windsor team that has yet to find itself offensively really show that, okay, we need to be there for our offense today because they had a tough week last week, and this is a strong Windsor defense. It's our time to really step up, make that key play. Maybe it's a big interception, forced fumble, whatever that might be, to keep them in it.
Yeah, if I'm looking at this from the Windsor side of things, really what I want to see from them moving forward here, I need to see Domofsky in this passing game really start to get going. If there's one area, and I think that, spoiling my pick here, I am going with the Windsor Lancers to win this
Oh,
game. But I think that if this is the case, if there's one area where U of T could perform well in defensively, it would be stopping the run. And I really think that with how well Ryan Stewart and the rest of those linebackers have played for U of T, they come downhill really effectively. And Ryan Stewart has been in the backfield for a lot of other teams, disrupting things. I think if you're going to have your best game passing, it should be against this U of T squad where you're almost forced to. And when you look at this freaking receiving core, I mean, Colby Ginn, Mateo Trifon, Tyreek Quason, Kareem Cotton, like this is a squad that's got the receivers. You have the athletes that are out there. Get them the ball and allow them to do their thing. But once again, haven't really seen Domofsky go off yet. 16 for 28, 172 yards and one touchdown against a MAC team that, albeit has a solid defense, but not nearly what I was expecting to see from him in that regard. I want to see this passing attack really explode.
no, I agree. I think it's a better matchup for them in terms of the defense. And again, a name that we probably haven't talked about as much over the year, but Lachlan Scardina for U of T, another nice weapon for them in the secondary. You beat me to the punch because I'm going to say too, I'm going to take Windsor to come into U of T to pick up the win as well. And in large part, I feel like just not only with what we've been seeing from Mambo, but with Delaney in the rushing attack as well, that as we talk about it so often, one of the things, especially with young quarterbacks, that can make them so much more comfortable is when you know that you can just hand the ball off and have success, force teams to load up the box a little bit more. And he's got some sure hand receivers. He doesn't have, we need to get, I mean, maybe there is on the roster. We just haven't really seen it yet. We got to get him his own, Tui OT or his own Basiliga of that, just like safety blanket. I just need 5 yards quick. Just give it into your big guy's hands. But they got some great runners behind a big O-line. And I think that's ultimately where, again, I'm just going to swing it on this, where even if he doesn't have the game of gains, they are able to reestablish the run game, albeit against a defense with such a good linebacking core, and Thibodeau as well in the mix with Linney and with Stewart, who you already talked about so effectively. But I trust Windsor just as it's part of their identity. We're going to run the ball, we're going to play good defense, and we might get some good plays offensively, and they've been able to be a really good team with that same recipe. Obviously, different players in the mix, but they have their identity, and I think defensively they can do some things to take away from what U of T does best. Final thoughts, Tom? Anything from this matchup left unspoken on?
Yeah, I guess the last thing, and I know I just said that from the U of T side, I think the one way that their defense would be successful is in the run stopping. I still want to see Andrew Delaney and Wegby Mumble really go off here. I know we've seen the capabilities that they have, and especially myself having seen them against Laurier in that week 2 matchup. I like the athleticism that I'm seeing from these guys a whole lot. It hasn't really translated all that well on the stat sheet. I mean, Andrew Delaney last week, obviously 10 attempts, 101 yards and a touchdown. That's nothing to sneeze at. But with the capabilities that both of these young men have, I want to see a big breakout game between. I want to see this offense as a whole for Windsor really start to establish themselves and move forward here because haven't really seen that so far with this squad.
And I wish this were a night game so that we could be leaving the At the 55 Bowl to go check it out. But regardless, it's not. And obviously, our loyalties have to reside with our own branded game of the week, the At the 55 Bowl, live from Ron Joyce Stadium. The Guelph Griffins rolling into town to take on the McMaster Marauders. Both clubs, as you set up earlier on, desperately needing a win here. Tom, before we jump into the game itself, as we said, we're going to do a slightly different thing this year. We will still do some game day lives, including the one at the Panda this year. We're not doing the game day live for this one, in large part because of an opportunity that I think we can comment on that we're going to be involved in, maybe in some detail, if not the whole thing. But Tom, what is it that's going to make this At the 55 Bowl special that we weren't able to do last year?
So last year at the 55 Bowl, that was famously when we started off our very first game day live and kind of kicked that off. We will not be doing that for this game. However, we will have game day lives coming later on this year, especially with the Carleton game, the Panda Bowl. That's really what we're most excited for. But in this one here, we've actually been asked and invited to come join the OUA TV broadcast for McMaster in this one. We'll probably either come on either at halftime or maybe during a certain drive, either the second or third quarter type of deal. But the fact that we've been invited on to an OUA TV broadcast to share our thoughts has been something that we're really excited about, and hopefully will help lend itself to a little bit more collaboration between us and the OUA TV going forward.
And we both obviously had opportunities before yourself. I remember the Laurier Carleton game that you were calling, and myself getting invited to work alongside Adam McGuire for a Waterloo and Windsor game a few years back. So not our first time behind the mics. And obviously you got your radio broadcasting debut, not truly your radio broadcasting debut, because you go back all the way to, you'll have to remind me what the call letters are for McMaster Radio.
CFMU.
Oh, sounds gorgeous coming out of your mouth, my friend. But we got Guelph, we got Mac, a game that both teams desperately need to see some things happening for themselves. For Guelph, I think it's got to be, the question has to be as far as the offense is concerned. Defensively, there's been some things that have raised concern, but we've also recognized that, okay, Demetrius Masuka having his first game last year, it's his returning back to the team he was playing, or his return against the team he was playing for the start of his career in McMaster. And there's just enough depth of talent there that it's almost, both the offense and the defense has been frustrating, but at times I feel like just more reliant that defense will get it together. Offensively, as frustrating as it's been, like, I still at times have to just remind myself that, golly, they are so banged up. They are so hurt, and that receiving core has still left us wanting. But we're, 3 weeks back from coming out of a Western game where we're like, both Aboud and McRae had to leave this game at times due to injury. And I'm not trying to make excuses for them. It's just the reality of it. And of course, with the running game, is Malloy in? Isaiah Smith? Is he going to start running dudes over a little more consistently? Caleb Sargent, now with his second game back. What's to make of all that? Stretchinger, I'm assuming, still out on that O-line. For Mac, as we said, defensively, there's been some really great things. That linebacking core with Shields, with Tony Sostanovic, and then with
Aaron Lavers,
Zachary Payne is the young guy in that secondary, and of course with Blad, really some great things that we're seeing Adam Grandy cook up. But offensively, we haven't quite seen it click yet. We had some great moments in that York game at the start of the year, and then we haven't really seen them look nearly as strong since. But you picked up on something that wasn't terribly apparent on the broadcast from talking with folks around Mac about sort of the current state of the offense, and some of which is, not our business to necessarily comment on in detail, but, it pertains to our conversation of, sort of who's calling the shots right now.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Coach Chris Hopkins is not with the program as of right now. He's got a family emergency, and of course, family has to take precedence here. So he's back home, and he was back home as of last week as well against the Windsor squad. So, as far as we know, the head coach is also the offensive coordinator. Coach Patasica is calling up the game for these McMaster Marauders, and obviously he's got a fair bit of experience being an OC as a Vanier Cup winning offensive coordinator. You went to the Hamilton Tiger Cats for a few years and all of that, but certainly over the past few years here, when Coach P has been the offensive coordinator, it's certainly something to be desired in terms of production that we have seen or lack thereof. So there's been listen, I'm the Mac alum. I'm on the alumni board. If there's one school that I'm pretty ingrained in terms of I'm gonna hear people's thoughts, it's McMaster. And there's a lot of folks out there who are not exactly happy with the direction of this team, and in particular the offense and how it's performing.
No, definitely. And the thing that and it's hard to say now after the fact. Like, I don't want to all of a sudden be like, oh, that makes sense for why we were seeing certain things against Windsor. But the one thing that I'm curious about is that we came into this year with that, with Coach Hopkins' second year in that position, and then, in that weird way that losing a star quarterback can, in ways, maybe not in the short term, make you better per se. Keegan Hall is obviously one of the best to do it in the league right now, best doing it in the league right now. But that might force you to have that rushing attack that we've yet to see. And to me, when I think about Potasic with Mac, I think about those great passing attacks that he's been able to have. Obviously, going back to having Kyle Quinlan, and obviously when you have Quinlan, you're gonna air it out. You had great running backs too, to state the least. And then in 2019, when he came back, obviously with Corey Grant, with Todd Galley there as well, and Andreas Duick, the major passing attack. That was a thing that I was, again, I'm not going to go ahead and say like, oh yeah, it did feel like they went away from the run last week. Because again, it's hard to say that after the fact, but something I'm kind of interesting to clock now, because from what we've seen from Guelph defensively this year, it's we've seen teams be able to move it in the air. We've seen teams be able to rush the ball on them. I wouldn't say that there's a thing that they're particularly like, oh, this is a major weakness, but there's also nothing aside from just the promise of knowing so many of those guys are uber talented, of saying there's a thing that they do better than anyone else. This is the classic thing of this team that I just feel like on any given day, they could, beat darn near anyone, but on any given day, they could, lose to a good number of teams in this league. So I guess maybe taking that into consideration, the Potasic piece of it, of whether or not they're going to be a little more air heavy, if you will, in the concept of who they're facing, because it's often, I would say, my hope is that teams are prepping based on what they think they can do, not in a vacuum, but against their opponent. From what we've seen with Guelph and from how Mac's been looking, regardless of it, if it's Coach Hopkins or Coach Potasic, what do you think they are going to get going? Is it going to be a big Luke Thalman game, or are we going to see Micah and some of those other running backs? I mean, I'd love to see my guy Noah Amaral back and healthy and what he can do to help that team out. But where do you see this team gaining yards against Guelph?
Well, I mean, once again, when you start talking about all of the injuries that Guelph has been dealing with, the defensive side of things, it's in that defensive secondary. Now, we've seen Miles Lafoucault. We saw Demetrius Masuka come back into the lineup in that last game against Ottawa, and I think they immediately had a pretty solid outing in that regard. But like we've seen previously, I think if this Mac squad is really going to do their thing, I would love to look at Thalman, and you never want to get a guy in just one dimensional. If he can be that dual dimensional, you add something else to that offense. But to Thalman, I'm saying stay in the pocket as long as you can. And if you are taking off and running, have your eyes downfield. Look for the opportunities that are there right before, because it seems like in that previous game, if he was taking off and running, even if he was 5-10 yards back, eyes were down. He's looking to see, try to find a gap and try to run it with his legs. And if you're in a 2nd and 9 situation here, that mentality of what can I get on the ground versus who else is open while I'm scrambling is the difference between getting a first down and punting. So to me, I'm saying Thalman, you have to stay in the pocket. Let's test this defensive secondary a little bit. Let's see how healthy they really are. But it's not like I'm saying Guelph's defensive secondary is weak by any means. It's just they're coming back from certain injuries. When you look at that front seven, they have struggled against a really solid run game in previous. Obviously, that Western game comes to mind. What Suleiman Kamara was able to do in that last game as well. So there is a potential there, but it's not exactly like Mac has had a very strong run game to lean on. So if anything, going into this game, I am really hoping that whoever's calling up the plays going into this one, and it looks like it'll be Coach Potasic, we're making a bit of a more of a effort to run the football and establish the ground game with Micah Duchesne and Braden Kelly, and really try to get run to set up the pass like they've been doing since like the 60s kind of thing. If you have to do a quick little play action to get it over the top, whatever that looks like, but the thing that we've been missing from this MAC team for so long has been a standard run game. And I think if there's ever going to be a game where you really have to attempt to get it going, it's in this one.
That makes sense. And I'm very much in favor of that because to me, this year is not about wins for Mac. It's about figuring out what your identity is moving forward. Now, and I picked Guelph to win this literally like a month and a half ago. I'm obviously not moving off that, though my confidence on that has certainly moved. And partly what's concerning me or what I'm really interested to see from Guelph this year is that in this week, I should say, is I think about this matchup with Mac and how really aside from when Malloy was in against that Windsor game, the running attack, despite the O-line being so strong, has left us wanting at times. The passing attack we know is certainly left us a little cold at moments. And Aboud had his first really bad game last week against Ottawa. And so, in my mind, I'm thinking about, okay, so let's say Malloy's not back. And they're just running into the heart of Lavers and Stanovic, and all these dudes and Bolt and Palmer in the middle, like a strong front seven with, some good DBs looking to rally to the ball as well. I'm curious to see, similarly, what is going to be Coach Saria's philosophy in attacking this MAC defense, Adam Grandy's defense. But there's part of me where, again, like going back to even week one, some people close with the team and who know a darn thing about passing game in Canadian football were like, some of these receivers need a bit of a kick in the pants. This passing game is, leaving a lot on the table there where I do feel like, and especially when we've seen Guelph start really slow against teams. I mean, down 14-0 against Windsor, obviously those blown opportunities against Western and everything that's going on there. Where like there's a reality where, whether we're into halftime, maybe even into the second half in the third quarter, where it's like, darn, like Mac could be having a lead. They could be really tight. If Horvat is, just punting the hell out of the ball and Guelph starting deep in their end and they're not getting it going, where there's obviously an emphasis on wanting to see this offense going, but it's also like, can we get it going early, right? Can our passing attack realize that, hey, look, someone's got to, I hate to sound like just like your, stereotypical talking head type. Someone's got to step up here and realize that, okay, our rushing attack is going up against the thing that they're best right now. And not that I don't think Guelph can run the ball on Mac. It's just like, hey, look, can we just do the thing that we should, if we're playing our game as best we can, should definitely be better than that, which is in the passing game, to do the inverse of what you said and maybe lighten up some of those boxes, have Lavers perhaps having to, go out wide. We've seen how they've used Isaiah Smith as a bit of a receiver. And if Malloy's in there, you can have some of those multi-back sets to get guys, having their eyes and moving one way and then you're running downhill at them. But that's the thing that worries me is the slow start stuff we've seen with them, how the rushing attack, if it's still injured, matches up against this MAC defense. And it both makes me nervous. And then with what Aboud, the first time we're seeing Aboud coming off a bad game, but my very optimistic version of myself is saying, okay, receivers, just passing attack in general, you have to see that this is your opportunity against the team that you just on paper should be better than. Step up and have a big game.
Yeah, I don't know what the message has to be to these Guelph receivers. I don't know if they need to see the film. I don't know what. Oh, need to see the film. Of course they're watching the film. Of course
Please
they
watch
are.
the film, guys.
Yeah, of course they are. But yeah, there. I don't know if there's one position group across every team so far that I feel has underperformed or has really has so much room for improvement is in these Guelph Griffins, and a lot of that comes down to because of how good we thought you were going to be, and I still think that they should be. I mean, Tessier goes off last game with 8 catches and 156 yards against Ottawa, but in that entire time, it's not like you and I are going back and forth being like, "Oh wow, are you seeing Tessier in this one?" It just feels like Aboud is taking advantage of what Ottawa is giving him in that regard, rather than Tessier going off and really beating coverage. And once again, it's difficult to see that from the OUA TV stream because once you get to like 5 or 10 yards off the ball, if you're running routes, you don't really see it in the back end, so you can't comment on route running or anything else unless you're there. But still, I just feel like this team should be so much better. I really have not seen anything from Willem Arsenault, and maybe that's just because teams are coming over there and being like, if there's one guy on this team we have to stop and limit, it's got to be this guy. But I would still love to see more of an effort to get him the ball and to really get this thing going. And like you said, this is easily one of, if not the worst performance that we saw from Tristan Aboud in that last game. And as we've known, as we were educated when we said something similar about Evan Hillock having a bad game, it's not all on him. It could be a lot of the times, hey, maybe receivers were running the wrong route. Maybe they pushed it or they didn't go too far and he overthrew them and that led to some of the interceptions or whatever else. So we don't know 100% because we're not in those rooms. But I think it's fair to say 18 for 32, 388 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 interceptions is not exactly where this young man wants to be. So I have to see more from this. And the one aspect of this as well that I don't even think I've told you yet because I mainly forgot, Donovan Malloy broke his hand against Windsor, which is why he is out. So I do not expect to see him in this game.
Yeah, that's a kick in the nuts. The Willem Arsenault piece, in fairness, he's dealt with a bit of an injury. I don't know exactly what. I think he was out for the Windsor game or one of those games recently. And so in trying to be fair to him, both beyond like the lack of production and also the comment I'm about to make, so I kind of want to put an asterisk next to what I'm going to say, was that he had such an amazing year for them last year, that big deep ball threat to that for them. But there was that part of us in the same way that it's an interesting parallel between him and Tristan Reddy, and saying that when your number one option, and for Guelph, again, not just Vashon Genesis, but Kane Stevenson as well, and obviously in the case of Tristan Reddy at Carleton, it's Kasim Ferdinand. When that guy's gone and you have to now step up into that role, how are you going to handle that? For Carleton, there's been a lot of things wrong. And so I'm not putting any or all of that on to Tristan Reddy's shoulders. Nor am I for Guelph, because again, it's a team sport, and the kid's been injured as well. And we've seen him at his best, much like we've seen with Tristan Reddy. OUA All-Star caliber guy. Like, we just know that to be the case. But it'll be interesting to see as he's, getting a little more comfortable with whatever that injury was that he was dealing with. Gosh, the Donovan Malloy broken hand. That's such a bad beat. Golly. But again, for Arsenault, there is that part of me that is thinking about conversations we had of like, well, how are you going to step up into this realm now when all of a sudden, exactly like you said, teams know that they can lock into you? And yeah, Tessier had his good game, and we saw Vardy have his good game, and we know that there's other pieces here who can step up. This kind of feels like there's the sort of hierarchy needs to be kind of figured out naturally of just like, yeah, that's our dude, and this is kind of our role and stuff. It just, it feels like it's a very it feels like a happy-go-lucky team, and that's great and everything. That was, yeah, we're all here just to do our part and everything, and just that was the part going into Windsor that scared me so much. Is I'm like, so far this team, they feel too nice of a team, and Windsor is, you're maybe it's because of their proximity to Detroit, and it's the Dan Campbell of it all. They're out there, biting kneecaps and stuff like that. That just feels like a tough one for Guelph, and I feel similar with an Adam Grandy defense with Mac here that is going to beat up an already beat up Guelph offense. But beyond the fact that I made the pick, I still think that on this day, Guelph, where these two teams are at, are better. I just don't think we've seen enough from Mac offensively against a team in Guelph who I think can really start to come together on this day. Not quite in the same way that we, are starting to identify, like, for York game to really find yourself against that Carleton defense. Not quite in the same manner, but for Guelph defensively, an offense that you can probably pick on a little bit and start to get your mojo going, and maybe that'll become what defines Guelph for the rest of the team for the rest of the season. Is all right. We thought that we had a magical offense and a really good defense, some good special teams. Hey, just like in the same way that you talked about what made Mac what they were for so long, Guelph, it was for so long of those 2010s teams, top defenses, top special teams units. And we didn't really talk about special teams, and that has been something that we've been concerned about. And offenses that do enough, that can run the ball well and not make big mistakes. So I think there's an opportunity for Guelph to start to get back on track with that. But I mean, man, oh man, I'll tell you, I've been doing an extra bit of stretching, and in the case I have to pull off this bike ride now, Tom. But I'm still sticking with Guelph on this day.
Yeah, if there's the last thing that I kind of want to call out, if I'm gonna call out, hey, I want to see some more production from the Guelph receivers. I want to see a little bit more production from Jackson Taylor. And I don't think that this is necessarily him not doing his job. I think it's more so he's been covered like crazy. I mean, in the 3 games or 4 games that he has played, 9 catches, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like, not bad, but I think we've come to expect so much more for him. And I certainly think that there were a few times you and I were in the house for last year where Keegan Hall is throwing a ball to Jackson Taylor, where typically speaking, we're looking at like, he looks covered. And then you see the ball placement and you go, oh no, he can catch that ball. That's really outstanding. He doesn't have that anymore. And so I think the one aspect that we wanted to see him get a little bit better at, and I think he has gotten better at, is his route running ability. And I need to see him without a perfectly thrown ball to the back shoulder in the one spot that he can get. Without that, I still need you to see you get open. You still have to be able to run off a DB, to make a cut, to do something to help out your quarterback, who, quite frankly, is looking for exactly like we were saying, that outlet receiver, somebody that I can constantly rely on to get the ball out to. And when you look at this squad, it should be Jackson Taylor. He should be the guy to lean on in that one. So I want to see some more for him. But I'm going with the Marauders to win this game.
Oh,
I am. I'm looking at this team. I'm looking at how well they've been playing. I think that defense is finally starting to come along. I mean, a Windsor squad that, albeit doesn't show the best offensively, but to limit them to only field goals to going down, I think puts them in a good spot. I want to see some more from this Mac offense. And I think of the 3 facets, you'll still see them struggle the most. But I'm really thinking that if Guelph doesn't come with their A game, with the amount of injuries that they have on that offense, how well I think this Mac defense can be. And even if for no other reason, Mike Horvat pinning them deep on their own 20, if not deeper than that, on some of this outstanding punts, and how much more we want to see from that Guelph special teams. I think that those two with a serviceable offense from Mac puts them over the edge and gets them the first up of the season.
Yeah. I hate the pick just out of the prospect of what it coming to fruition means on so many levels. And on that special teams point, especially how you framed it of how they were, holding Windsor to, 5 field goal attempts for Litster. Well, he was 5 for 5, and, we would expect that going into it. Ben Lane is 3 for 8 on the year. And that's a small sample size, but 3 for 8 is just not good. And I don't have every single field goal ahead of me. I don't know if they were taking just, I don't know, maybe all 5 of those they were going for just deep shots, whatever. I don't think that was the case. Again, I'm not trying to be mean to the kid. Just the numbers are what the numbers are. Tom, this is going to be this could be a rough day for me. I think, yeah, we'll gosh. Oh boy, let's get to our last game from Warrior Field in Kitchener-Waterloo. The Queens Golden Gales are taking their show on the road to take on the Waterloo Warriors. Tom, we saw Waterloo last weekend defensively do a really good job early on of limiting Laurier, of course, with as good an offense as we've been seeing in the OUA and arguably in the USports calendar across the league. Let's just start off like this. Queens against UofT, the final score was what it was. But as we alluded to, we were trying to give UofT them flowers that early in that game, both offensively and defensively, they were doing some things to limit Queens. There was part of me that was actually, it was, I think, 10-0 going out of the first quarter. And I'm like, hey, you know what? That's a good, not great, or let alone ideal setup for UofT. But hey, given what we thought about this matchup, happy with that. Waterloo in this case, really showing a good job slowing down the run. Jared Kasari's, kind of had a quiet, really good year where it's like the numbers are still really impressive, but just, I don't know, maybe it's just because the bar is so high. What do you kind of make of what we're going to be talking about checking in at halftime? I mean, assuming we're not on a broadcast at the time, are we going to be having a conversation of like, dang, it's like 15-4 right now in Waterloo, or is it going to be, it's 27-0 right now for Queens? Which of those outcomes, and of course there's a lot more opportunities than that, but the prospect of Waterloo doing what they've been able to do a bit consistently and have that defense really slow down teams early on, even if they end up, in the grand scheme, getting a few more on them, or Queens, despite a bit of a slow start last week as well, and coming off of that loss at home against Laurier, but a game that, as we were saying, they were looking really impressive. The 32 points on Laurier is really nice. Which outcome do you think is more likely when we're checking in at half from Ron Joyce, that Waterloo is, we can say it's a trend of like, man, early on they're really keeping them in games, or that, dang, Queens, yeah, okay, they have that offense, all right, yeah, Vreekin, yeah, he's hitting his guys, oh, no, hey, two OTs in the end zone there, oh, okay, which of those would you put more stock in?
Honestly, with the way that they've been playing, I put stock in the 15-4 outcome. I really like this Waterloo defense, and we've seen it in the 4 games that they've played. Yes, that the end score is 41-19, but let's not forget in that first quarter going into the second, like, it was pretty damn tight, and they were doing a lot of really great things. Now, there's only so much and so much time you can actually limit that Laurier offense. They're gonna find holes and they're gonna score, but the fact to see them playing so well in that first part of the game, I really liked a lot. And outside of that game, the most that they've been scored on has been 27 points from an Ottawa squad. They lose 27-12 against Ottawa. They win 26-23 against a U of T squad that has that explosive offense and really does their thing. And then they lose another tight game to Carleton, 19-14, on the back of a run game that we were really expecting from the Ravens going into this game. So I like this Waterloo defense a lot. I think that if they had an offense that was more consistent, they would have a few more wins in the win column at bare minimum. And I think that Queens, while they should have an all-star offense, we really haven't seen them go off yet in this one. We've seen flashes of brilliance. Let me be clear, brilliance. Preston Martin and the rest of that Queens receiving core looks great. And when Vreekin is on, he is on. But I have not seen enough consistency from there, especially in the passing game, for me to say that, oh, this is just going to be an outright Queens blowout from the get-go.
I think that's fair. And I guess just sticking with Queens offensively, I don't think it's going to be any surprise that I'm assuming we're both on Queens to win this game. Nonetheless, going to go back to this sort of framework of like, what is it that we're looking to see from them? Because you're right, there hasn't, and well, I understand what you're saying about the passing attack, and I understand more your take that you've made a few times of Reekin's been really good, but just there's sometimes a few mistakes where it's like you just can't be making those mistakes, like just a missed ball. And as we've learned over the season, not that it's news to us, but just from talking to other players around the league of, oh wow, that you just can't tell on the broadcast or even live that actually was on the receiver, right? It's not always falling on the quarterback. But we have seen, obviously Nathan Falcone, Tuioti, Camillo, you mentioned Preston Martin, Camillo, like all these guys where it's just like beyond Kasari as a guy that's clearly at the top of his position. It's a it feels like the sum is greater than the its parts type of offense. And with that in mind, because I think there's a with what we've been seeing from them, how great this defense is and the special teams, the Matt Driver piece, as we highlighted, coming back to punt for them, I think is a huge piece to them. And that they're, letting Ian St. Arnaud, get in on the returning game now and not just, relying on him to just, intercept balls and then take them to the house. I think Queens has shown us enough to know that, like, beyond just this game in specific, that I mean, they were in that game. They gave away that game at Queens, in Kingston against Western, and again, it's like we didn't see a great game from Kasari, and there wasn't really a breakout game like anywhere in specific. So it's like I feel like they've shown enough with this kind of offense by committee, and a lot of members of those committee are pretty high ranking to give a fight to some of the best teams, albeit Western's defense has gotten better throughout the year. So I agree with what you're saying. I do think that there's a version of just saying they just need to refine what they're doing versus saying that there's something completely missing, that we really need to see this, or we really need to see that. It maybe hasn't been just knock your socks off, but I do feel like they've been very consistent. Whether or not that level of consistency is enough to make us think that come the playoffs, we have taken them against your Lauriers and your Westerns of the world. Let's flip the script though, because as you said, talking about lack of consistency, certainly a word that we could describe for Waterloo offensively. And obviously they've dealt with injury with Nick Orr going out and Caban and, Quentin Springer piece of everything here. And, seeing just Anthony Miller in year 6, Brampton's finest, doing his thing, the surgence of the young guy and Roy Vanderveen. There's some really nice things there, but much like what we saw with UofT, gosh, like Queens is just a tough team to try to be finding yourself against. Because for UofT, obviously, we were trying to see what's that next punch for them, what's that next thing, and Queens just didn't allow them to really do much of anything. Gosh, I mean, it's just a game where, as we said going into last week, I don't think Queens needs to do all that much, show much of their hand, and just say, look, we're going to just play our base stuff and we should be able to slow down your run. And okay, cool. Ramel Samuel Slocum had his first good game last week, but take your pick. Who do you want to put on him? Do you want to put on Seaway? Do you want to put Ian St. Arnaud? Do you want Miller Melson to be tracking him? Does Keegan Vanix need to keep an eye on him? And whoever, Basiliga, cool. He's a big dude, but I present you Exhibit P as in pace, who can, chase him down and take him down without, too much else assistance. I just like, it's for as much as we can say that Waterloo might be able to, help slow down Queens a bit early on. I can't fathom. Sorry, this comes off a bit harsh. I can't really fathom what I'm expecting to see from Waterloo against this defense. I'm really trying to stretch my mind of saying, like, beyond just the fact that on any given Sunday type philosophy, I don't know where there's even that iota of saying that, like, this is where they can really, maybe give themselves a chance to score some points.
No, I'm right there with you, and I think it's important to note before I get into the Queens defense that while I am saying I want to see more from this Queens offense, and I will stick by that, let's not forget that this is a Queens offense that in 4 games has put up 42, 38, 32, and then 44 points respectively. Like, this is a high-flying offense and has a lot of potential here, but even in those games, I mean, they're 2-2, but even in those games, there's something more to be desired, with more consistency, be better, because we're not happy right now with the Queen squad just being, you're solid, you're a good team. Like, we're looking for this Queen squad to make the jump, to get up there and to be in that upper echelon, and I think that's where that kind of comes into play. But going into this Waterloo offense against the Queen's defense, I mean, I'm right there with you. This is an offense that has not exactly exploded by any means. They've not really showcased a whole ton from that, and I think even in the win that they've had, it was really their defense doing their thing and keeping them in that game and allowing them to just do just enough in this regard. I would need to see so much more from this Waterloo offense before I'm ready to start saying, oh yeah, they can potentially exploit this on a Queens defense, because Well, pick your battles, pick your poison, really. This is a defense that is more than likely going to limit how much you can actually run the ball out of a 30 front when you've got pace. And even before you get past Eric Johnston or Stephen Capay, I apologize, we've been mispronouncing that so often, and Oliver Jackson and everything. Like, this is a squad that has showcased that they can compete with the Westerns and the Lauriers of the world and do it at a relatively high level. I don't know what the angle is for this Waterloo offense.
Yeah, first of all, good job by you on behalf of us for fixing the pronunciation, or Joe Robinson was going to call and cease us to get after us on that one. So, I mean, shout out to the London Robinsons. So much love for that family out there. Yeah, it's going to be a tough day. I don't even know what I'm like. I don't even want to say I want to see this, I want to see that, because it's just not a fair barometer. I want to be surprised coming out of Saturday and saying, oh, dang, I did not see that coming, because in all the fairness I can extend towards this matchup, I don't know where it is for them. No, I'm sorry to cut it short on this. I mean, it's Queens on the road on this one. It's that offense, as you said, that's been putting up big points against the defense that can maybe try to slow down the run a little bit. But with the weapons they have, Tom, I really don't know what else to say on this matchup. It's pretty slanted.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. And when you're looking at the rest of this schedule here for Queens, you play Waterloo this week. You then host York, you travel to Guelph, and then you host Windsor. Three solid teams that, while I think for the majority we'll still be looking at Queens to pick up the wins, will still give you a little bit more of a battle than the Toronto team that you just played against, potentially what Waterloo could do. So if anything for this Queens squad, you want to have a really big game in all three facets to really make sure that you're hammering home how good you can be and getting a positive vibe to start and go into the playoffs. I think this is your time to really kick that into high gear and say, let's make sure that we show the rest of the league what we're capable of in this one. That's what I want to see from Queens.
And, again, for a team in Queens that's, thinking about last year and for a few years, injuries has been a thing. Just play smart. Just play it smart. I'd be remiss to not say that there's part of me that's just the matchup of Matt Nesbitt versus Kevin McNeil is those are two competitive guys that know each other very well. That is a fascinating matchup to say the least. And I think K-Mac would sell the farm to be able to just slow down this Queens offense or greater. So that aspect of it is certainly not lost on me. But Tom, let's take our sights beyond the OUA and take folks around the league looking at the rest of the USports calendar and talk about a few games that we're really excited about, starting on a Friday night out of Montreal, where the McGill Redbirds, coming off their bye, are hosting the Montreal Carabins. Allez les Bleus, allez les Bleus, coming off that big win against Laval, followed by a trip out to the prairies for a major CanWest showdown, the Battle of Saskatchewan, the Huskies hosting the Rams. My goodness, I spoiler alert, we're going to talk about that game. But another great CanWest game, a nightcap out of UBC, where the Dinos, coming off of their win in the Battle of Alberta, are taking on the UBC Thunderbirds. We'll probably talk about that one a little bit, especially after you just being there in the house for UBC. Saturday kicks off with some AUS football, a huge matchup in St. Mary's at St. FX. I definitely want to talk about that one. 1 p.m. as well sees Concordia hosting Laval. 3 p.m. Acadia hosts Bishops, and the week 5, week 4 week ends with Manitoba hosting Alberta. Alberta coming off the loss, Manitoba coming off of that big win against Saskatchewan. Tom, where do you want to start here? A couple games that I think we'd be remiss to not talk about. Where do you want to start?
Well, if we just keep with our standard schedule and we go by the scheduled games, how they appear here, I think we could start with the Friday night. And Man, what a Friday night here. To save a little bit of the best for last to start with, I want to talk about this Calgary UBC game because this is a game to me that I think is going to be highly, highly competitive. Both squads in kind of a similar spot here. Calgary really finding ways to win in certain games and coming out in big moments, taking Regina into overtime, defeating Manitoba right at the buzzer when Manitoba decides to go for two, and getting a couple of key wins, and obviously the last one in the Battle of Alberta against the University of Alberta. I like this squad a lot, and I like the fact that they've been able to put together winning drives and to get a lot of things done. But this is a UBC squad that has gone through 2 weeks now of some real struggles here. You saw the Derek Engel show going into that last game against Regina, and while he did some good things, I'd really like to see a bigger growth from him. I think the big thing that's holding back Drew Viotto going into this game is the fact that, for the folks who aren't aware, not only is he another quarterback that Coach Nil got from the US to come up, but this is also a guy who played his high school football in America. So it's been a very long time since he was playing at a high level Canadian football, and this is one of the highest in CanWest here. So we'll see which quarterback is the one to really come out. But more than anything, I'd like to see UBC and Kahari Jones in that offense start to incorporate a little bit more and change up depending on which quarterback is in. You know, one of the things that I was talking about with Gord Randall after the game in that Regina UBC game is the fact that I don't think that this offense really changed all that much, regardless of Drew was in versus Derek Engel was in. And I think those are two vastly different quarterbacks who deserve to have a slight difference in the offense that you're kind of running here. So lots of things that I want to see from this game in particular, but I still am very, very convinced that this is going to be a highly competitive matchup.
Well, and I think that's a fair take on it. And with that being said, it's interesting given that it's in BC, but I think as you were alluding to, like Calgary's, beyond just the record and kind of similar in that UofT corollary of it could have gone one way, it could have gone the other. It's still worth saying that even though a lot of those close games, you could have said, oh man, like could Alberta have pulled that win off last week? Absolutely. Right? Could Manitoba have pulled off the win 2 weeks ago? I mean, absolutely. But they've been the team to get it done. And they were right there on the cusp against a Regina team I'm trying to remember where they were, like a top 5 team in Regina, at 5th in all of USports. So Calgary's not only done it in getting the wins, but has done it in tough, tight games. I mean, as we talked about that Regina game, how many points they had to score in the fourth quarter alone to send it to overtime, which is so fascinating, again, because as you highlighted with this club being made up of either fourth-year vets or first-year players. And obviously for the vets, you expect a little bit of that moxie in there. But for clearly with the number of rookie players in there, to be able to have that kind of composure, and you don't often hear me giving credit to Ryan Shan, but, I do have to say, obviously, some of that does come down to just the overall structure of the team and just from the head man down or the head person down. So a really fascinating matchup to say the least. And, for UBC as well, like I even think about that first game against, against Manitoba, it was like, 21-9. But again, a closer game than I think the score truly reflects with Manitoba, the way they were running the ball, which is something I love for them. I don't know. Do you want to make a pick for this one? I know we haven't really been doing that as part of ours. I feel like we're just going to look foolish on it. I don't know how to really pick this one. There's part of me that thinks, again, Calgary with what they've been doing can pick up the win. UBC at home with their games. I don't really know, though.
Yeah, if there's one thing that I've kind of realized the more and more that we're talking about this is that it is a nightmare to try to correctly pick Canada West games because of how damn close they are and how competitive this league is. But if I'm looking at this, to be honest with you, I'm going to give the edge to Calgary. I think Calgary's going to go into BC, and I think the main fact of the fact that every game that they've been in so far has been a tight matchup and that they've come on the other side of those. Even in that last game or the first game of the season when they lost to the Regina Rams, like you mentioned, I believe they scored 16 points in the fourth quarter, including a single off of a kickoff in order to tie the game up to go into overtime here. So when push comes to shove, they've consistently been able to come out with big plays to get in there. And I think with a UBC squad that still seems to be trying to find their rhythm on offense and really try to get things going, I'm going to go with the Dinos to win this one.
That makes all the sense in the world. Sure, I'll take the Dinos too. I'll take the Thunderbirds. I don't really care. If that one was hard to pick, Tom, the next game that we're having to talk about is just going to keep you up late into the evening figuring out where the angles are. It's the Battle of Saskatchewan, the battle for not just CanWest supremacy at this stage, Hardy Cup preview undoubtedly, but also when we talk about that top 10, that top 10, right? A lot of things are going to sway as a result of this game. Just for starters, the thing that I can't get over with Regina this year, and obviously all the things you've been talking about with Erickson, how great that rushing attack has been, Pelletier, what he's been doing, but is just the fact that when you look across all of USports in offensive production, that this Regina Rams team sits second to Western in points per game with 42.3 points, which is just like such an awesome thing to see for a team that, again, gave Laval as much as they could handle a year ago in that Mitchell Bowl. Largely, I think, being to be fair, and wasn't as tuned into CanWest last year, slightly more this year, but I think a team that was much, much more just hanging their hat on the defensive side of the ball. There's that interesting St. Mary's parallel here with these two teams. That alone has been just so staggering to see. And for Saskatchewan, again, I already said it, them falling to 7 or that tie for 7, I think is a bit of an overreaction to a loss against a Manitoba team that is better than the record. And that, as we said, okay, if that field goal is good, I mean, like, that's the thing where it's like just a make or a miss. How much of a difference does that make in the grand scheme of like, oh, this team is not as good as these teams all of a sudden? Clearly both these teams are the best CanWest has to offer, the arguably the best that we have to offer in all of USports. It's just what a matchup. I'm hoping though this one plays out in the, again, put it aside what these defenses do. I kind of want to see the light show with this one, with these two offenses going up against one another. What do you make of this, Tom?
Yeah, I think we have all of the capabilities to see that. I mean, when you go back, amazingly, first and foremost, when you look at the matchup between these two, Saskatchewan had not lost a game to Regina before last year until 2017. So it had been a long time of domination. And then Mark McConkey's first year in there, he gets the first win against Saskatchewan in the regular season, 33-28. They drop a close one to the Huskies, 22-20. And then obviously in that Hardy Cup matchup, 19-14 to get that dub in Regina's first Hardy Cup in a long, long time. I think it might have been the first ever, to be honest with you. But one big difference going into this game here is, I believe, Anton Ammerud. In the 3 games that he played against Regina, he threw 7 interceptions. This is a man now who has one of the former best that Saskatchewan had in Mason Nyes helping to call out these games. And so far in this year, he is 68 for a one-on-one, a 67% completion, 882 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, and 0 picks. He has been way smarter with the football. He has been smart, and he has been impressive as all hell, to be honest with you, and how he has been going about these things. Now, one of the biggest critiques against Regina last year, and despite all of that, they still made it to a national semi, was Noah Pelletier. People didn't think that he was good enough to really be a top-tier quarterback in this league, and he left a lot of things to be desired. Well, we just ran through Anton's numbers. This is Noah Pelletier, 64 for 87, a 73% completion rating, 886 yards passing, 5 touchdowns to no interceptions, along with 2 unbelievable run games for both of these squads here. So I think that both of these defenses going into this are going to have their absolute hands filled trying to limit these offenses. And exactly like you said, there's a very strong possibility that there's a big time scoring potential that's here. The only thing that I'll say is that when you look at offenses who are quick and have the ability to score quick, I'd certainly look at the Saskatchewan Husky team with all of the weapons. Anton Amandrew playing some of his best football and the receivers that are like there. Once again, I was in the house for Regina versus UBC last week, and to see the Rams and how they're going, Nicholas Sirleaf is easily one of the best receivers in the conference. He should be a Canada West All-Star, certainly. But it's the majority of that game was grind them out yards, chunk plays, driving the ball all the way down the field, eat up 7 minutes in a quarter and finish with a touchdown. That's the back-breaking offense that this Regina Rams offense brings. And you're almost at a detriment on the Husky side because Regina does exactly that. They march down the field and score. Even if Saskatchewan scores as well, if they do it like that, you're still not giving your defense all that much time to really rest and recuperate after that. So much to look at. This is, oh my God, I cannot wait for this game.
Tom, I'm not even going to ask you to make a pick because I don't want to take away just from the enjoyment of just you watching whether it's the offensive light show or if the defenses just come out and duke it out. I want you to just be able to enjoy your Friday night by all means if you feel like it. But otherwise, let's give a cursory glance to the Alberta-Manitoba game. Because again, I think this is a Manitoba team that I think had a lot of high expectations coming into this year. Obviously, with Tuchinski, with that running game with Braden Stubbs. I obviously can't say what I said about Saskatchewan being that close to picking up that win and then act like all of a sudden Manitoba, the reality of them, the reality in which they could be sitting here in this game with Alberta as an 0-3 situation apiece, that isn't a live opportunity that could have happened with just that much of a difference in that last game. But even had that come to pass and both these teams are sitting at 0-3, I don't think these teams are really evenly matched. Like to me, it doesn't matter if this was in Alberta. The fact that it's in Manitoba makes it that much more confident with the Bisons. This is a prime example of looking past the record, and I do think again Alberta. It's hard to say they're better than the record just because. Well, how can you be better than? They are better than a team without a win, but like who are they getting wins against right now in this conference because all these teams are so good? I say all that to say I want to see those positive steps from Alberta, but I just want to continue to see Manitoba and Jackson Tuchinski, Braden Stubbs, and this running attack with that big O-line just continue to solidify themselves as a team that is going to be that prime. You don't want to see them coming to your house in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with this game, you actually see a lot of potential for another offensive showcase in a certain way. I don't think you're going to see like a 40-42 kind of a matchup here, but I think I like this Alberta Golden Bear offense. I like Eli Hetlinger. I think he makes a lot of smart decisions with his guys that he has, but when you look at a team like Alberta, who primarily runs a 30 front, and then you look at Braden Stubbs over on the Manitoba side, and a quarterback in Jackson Tuchinski who can sling it, but is by far the most dangerous when he is on the run and ripping up defenses with his legs, that's a recipe for disaster going into that game, especially with an Alberta squad that has certainly struggled against the run in their first few games here. So I'm expecting this to be a Manitoba W, but I still think you're going to see some good things from this Alberta Golden Bear offense, and especially Eli Hetlinger.
Let's take our talents to RSEQ quickly, because I think there's more interesting things to talk about in the AUS. So let's finish with that conference. And I don't think there's a ton of time we need to spend on these games. As we said, Montreal is going to McGill on Friday. Laval is going to Concordia on Saturday. And, the thing I'm curious to see in this, and we were so bullish going into that game, like prior to what we saw against Montreal of, Arnaud Desjardins is likely the RSEQ MVP favorite. And as a result, and just with what he's been showing this year, is a great candidate to pick for the Heck Crichton. Here's the thing I want to throw your way, and Les Montagnards. Hopefully, you don't hate me for this. Like, I feel like if this is relax on the take, but maybe you feel the exact same way. With Montreal already being a tick up in the win column, obviously these two teams are going to duke it out in about a month's time in Quebec City, which there's a long way from now. A lot of football to be had, but as of right now, when you go by the numbers. Desjardins, great year he's having. 77% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns, 1 interception. Of course, that interception was the pick 6. Pepe Gonzalez, just under 74%, averaging 269 a game, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, there's such a strong case. And especially if Montreal can just continue to run the table and if nothing else, at least give Laval, which I think there's all the reason to think they'll give them a good game in Quebec City at the end of the year, let alone if they beat them and sweep them in the season series, that, what a quarterback duel for the MVP slot. And it's going to be a fun game or fun weekend to watch in terms of, okay, it's Pepe versus Eloi Regimbault Latendresse. Latendresse Regimbault. I might have mixed up the last names. As a fellow double-barreled last name, I apologize, ELR. Oh, ELR. ELR Latendresse Regimbault. Great quarterback matchup there, but I think even with some of those guys on the defense that we like, with our guy in JT for McGill, I think this is a game that Pepe can put up some points. And again, don't have as much a deep dive on Concordia, but I have to imagine that Arnaud's going to have a solid game against them. What do you make of it in just terms of we're not going to see these teams play each other until I think the last week of the regular season, the RSEQ, of just kind of keeping our eyes on this matchup between who amongst Gonzalez and Desjardins is going to come home with the MVP and as a result possibly be a Heck Crichton favorite?
I think while it would always be nice to say confidently, it's always going to go to the best player in each conference. There is that human bias when you go into who's the RSEQ MVP, who's the OUA MVP, so on and so forth. And I think while Desjardins certainly has to be the front runner going into this season, if you see a young man in Pepe Gonzalez who has a similar resume start to come up here with Arnaud already having won it before, the tendency might lean towards allez les bleus with Pepe Gonzalez in this one. And certainly with the way that he's been playing here, it's rightfully so. If he can go in to Quebec City and not even necessarily have to win the game, if he can put up another performance like we saw against Laval that he did in Montreal in Quebec City, in the heart of that unbelievable atmosphere where you've got 15,000 Laval fans screaming at you, if he can do the same thing, I think he deserves it. I truly do. Arnaud Desjardins would have to continuously keep playing at the highest of levels that we know he absolutely can be. But right now, if you're looking at this from a front runner race, I think it's Pepe's to lose. If he continues to have strong games as they keep going, I think it could be him.
It's remarkable to think that, not just because of his first year taking the reins, what we've seen from Arnaud, but just the fact that, again, if you go back to that game, the one blemish on Arnaud's, aside from the loss as itself, the interception that gets taken back by Elijah Cremé, again, I don't know exactly what went wrong on it, but it was very much just either he had a mix-up on what his receiver was running or the receiver did, because he just threw it to Cremé to just open space. So the thought that one of the major pieces that might end up being a deciding factor in all this could have been, the receiver ran a hook instead of the out that Desjardins was expecting. But I mean, that's just what makes it that, it's that human element that is it fair? No, the fairness has nothing to do with it at the end of the day. But hey, it's going to be great competition to watch nonetheless. Let's make our way all the way out to the Maritimes and look at the games in store for us there. Just off the jump, just say quickly, Bishops at Acadia again. Great for them to sort of get the ball rolling a little bit, that win against St. FX. But the caveat, as we mentioned, of not seeing Silas Fagnon in that game, it just is what leaves going back to our top 10 conversation. I think us beyond the fact that we're not AUS experts, but slowly getting there in a stage just being like, it's so hard to read right now, with Bishop picking up that win with Fagnon out. So if nothing else, another great opportunity for Quirion to bolster his own, likelihood of perhaps becoming a back-to-back AUS MVP. But Tom, it's obviously this St. Mary's, that St. FX game that is going to be catching our attention. And I gotta say, like, if come kickoff, or I know CanWest gives out depth charts. I don't know if AUS does. OUA certainly doesn't. But whether it's a depth chart that comes out early or just us trying to tune in while we're at Ron Joyce, if Fagnon's not in the game, I'm really not all that interested in the outcome. Aside from, I guess I shouldn't say that. If Sam Tremblay, I think it's Sam Tremblay, ends up beating St. Mary's with with obviously a great cast of characters around him, and Coach Waterman is this all-time coach in his own right, obviously, that's super telling. But without Fagnon in this game, I'm not gonna blink twice or whatever in taking St. Mary's to win. So it's where. And if he's out, and it's because if he's out for the year, that's obviously such a bad beat, and I'm hoping that's not the case. But that obviously changes everything. But if it's just he's out for another couple of weeks, it's still just like I can't make up my mind about this conference until I get to see, St. Mary's obviously took it to Bishops by all accounts in a fair fight, fair matchup, if you will. But just for the possibility of back-to-back weeks of not getting to see St. FX fully loaded against these other two top teams. Unless we find out that Silas is done for the year, I still don't think I can really properly read the room of the AUS.
Well, going into this game, to be honest with you, even if Silas is back and fully healthy, I think I'm still taking St. Mary's, especially coming off the bye going into this game. Like, that's another big factor into this one. We know how good that St. Mary's defense is, but to be honest with you, I want to see a little bit more from Justin Sibley. I think that he has a lot of potential. I think he's done a lot of really great things in this game. 67% completion, 287 yards per game averaging, 5 touchdowns, but 4 interceptions.
Yeah.
That's the real kicker going into this one. I want to see him be smarter with the football, and I want to see him do something more with it. But I think it's a very tough beat to go up against this St. Mary squad. Certainly not only coming off a bye week, but riding a high in the domination that they had against the Bishop squad before going into that said bye week. This has got to be one of the most dangerous teams in the AUS right now, provided that they don't just sit on their laurels in that bye week and come out of this thinking, even if Silas isn't playing, we're going to crush these guys. Because like you said, there is a phenomenal cast of characters in that St. FX room. So I would still pick St. Mary's to win this game, but if Silas is done for the year, that really hurts St. FX chances of getting into a Loney Bowl and potentially getting out of the conference.
Yeah, no, it stinks something fierce. You're totally right. With Shibley, still room to grow. It's been good to see that complimentary football, but just doing a little bit of a dive on St. Mary's with some of these guys defensively. Seeing some good things early from Ryan Butler, who I believe was out for them last year. So the idea of just that defense getting bolstered that much more is obviously really promising to be able to think about the prospects of this team. And Jamari Brown on the defensive line having a really good year start to the season. Kalen Edwards in the linebacking core. And again, a St. Mary's team that we just know was able to hang their hat defensively and take themselves to the pinnacle of AUS football. So it's gonna be a fun game, but just I hate just even and it just goes back to all this commentary of like if we could just know more of these things, we wouldn't have to be just speculating about it. I wouldn't have to be like I don't know, and I hope it's not that the guy like an all-timer and Fagnon is out for the year. But like without any further information, we're left to our own devices. Please, USports Football, help us. Help you, okay? Help us help you. And we're helping y'all out a lot already. So just give us a little bit here. Tom, I think we're going to call that a wrap on the Week 5 preview podcast. Again, if you didn't listen to Tom in his incredible interview with the head coach of the UBC Thunderbirds that he's picking against Coach Nil. Hey, let us. How do you like that? They let him into the facility. They tour him around. They let him in the broadcast booth. And here he comes taking the dinos, taking his boy Sheehan to go into their house, eat their lunch.
If you're really just dragging me under the bus like that, McMaster shouldn't allow me on in Hamilton at all with some of the takes that I've had.
Oh, Tom, you always take it in stride. So much good football. Again, go do listen to that interview Tom did with Coach Nil. He's one of the all-time greats, and Coach Nil's good as well. To pick that up, I called you one of the all-time greats. Coach Nil is also. Anyways, okay. In the house for Ron Joyce, at Ron Joyce, for the At the 55 Bowl. We'll be in the booth a little bit. We're changing things up. Shout out again to OUA TV and the folks at McMaster for giving us this opportunity. Really excited. Again, it's not our first time, but you never know. It could be the last time that with our opinions about OUA football. And of course, so much other great stuff. Battle of Saskatchewan, the rivalry between Pepe Gonzalez and Arnaud Desjardins, the old vet and the young guy coming on the scene. There's something for everyone this weekend. Tom, final thoughts for the folks out there before we let them go for the week.
Yeah, in the terms of just promoting people and saying thank you, James Tan is the producer for McMaster who reached out to us. So shout out James Tan for getting us in the broadcast booth in this game. But I feel like a broken record, but my God, look at some of these games here. I can promise you, I had a small little get together that was planned, or an alumni thing that was going on with my old high school, and then we're raising some money for a football team and everything else. If that bar ain't showing the Battle of Saskatchewan, I ain't going, man. I need to see Regina versus Saskatchewan on that Friday night game. I cannot wait, and I love the fact so much that you and I have really committed to expanding out and covering more of USports, because even when it's a quote-unquote slow week in the OUA, you've got some top-tier matchups regardless of where you look at from here. So I'm so excited for that. And I know I'm putting this at the very end, so I'm hoping that a lot of people will listen to the entirety of this podcast and actually give us their feedback. But we've gone back and forth with it, and people, let us know, do you prefer having an extra long podcast like this to add on to the U Sports coverage, and specifically in Canada West at the tail end of it? Or would you rather a CanWest focused podcast where we're spending at least an hour, knowing us, an hour and a half or 2 hours, to talk about CanWest as an entirety? So let us know what your thoughts are.
And Tom, if you do end up at a bar on Friday night in Burlington, Ontario, showing Saskatchewan versus Regina, like that, we need them to sponsor the show. In fact, we need to record live from that bar from here on out. Please let me know if that comes to fruition. I will drop whatever plans I have in Toronto and come join you for your Assumption reunion going on there. Tom, I can't wait to be in the house for the At the 55 Bowl with you from Ron Joyce. I can't wait to be freaking out following all these other games across Canada alongside you as we do so. And of course, can't wait to be breaking it all down with you later on this week right here at the 55.